Now I'm going to show you how you can weld using a torch. It's called welding or brazing. Brazing, I think, typically refers to when you put two pieces of metal together that are not the same kind of metal. And this is one of the benefits. If you're using the arc welder or the MIG welder, you're using steel. The arc welder can weld aluminum, but it's very challenging because aluminum melts at a very low temperature. The settings are all completely different. You need a different electrode, and it can be very difficult. So I think welding aluminum is more of an expert welding process. So I'm all set with my gloves. I have my face mask and I have my striker, and I've demoed this once before in the oxy-acetylene video, but I wanted to show you how to weld. So the only thing that's different now is I'm going to heat these up until they're red hot, and then I'm going to use this fill rod and add that in as I go. So I'm going to turn on the vent fan and you'll see what I mean. Remember, I'm lighting the acetylene first. Bringing in the oxygen until I get a nice steady flame. Hear that hiss and the flame is a little smaller? That's just right. That'll be good. Now I'm going to heat this up until it's red hot, and then I'll add my fill rod in. The hottest part of the flame is right at the tip of that little blue triangle. Now this should be welded together, but if I'd have moved it while it was red hot, it would just come apart again. Now I'm going to loosen it up, move it around, and try to weld the backside. So now you're looking at the backside, and if you look close, you can see a little gap there where it's not quite welded in the back. So I'm going to add some weld to the back as well. So there's a good lesson there. I had it welded together. I turned it around and heated it back up, and the weld that I did the first time just came right apart again. Also means I probably didn't have as good a weld in the front in the beginning as I thought. So now to fix this, I'm going to have to go back to the bench grinder, grind this up a little bit, and try it again. Alright, I'm ready to try it again. I ground off that little bit of brass that I had on my fill rod from the first attempt, and I beveled the edges a little bit to take the new weld. I've got it clamped securely in the vise. Now all I have to do is light my torch, preheat it, and I'll try it again. That felt like a better weld, and I put a little bit extra fill rod in there. So now I'm going to let that cool off completely before I touch it. And then I could take it and flip it over in the vise and use the angle grinder, or take it to the bench grinder and clean that weld up a little bit. Here's that sample brazing piece that I made a moment ago, and now that it's cooled off, you can see the weld. Now this is probably the weakest kind of welding, because it's just a little brass filler in between the two pieces of steel. But the brass does fuse to the steel enough that it's fairly sturdy. I've used this technique to make hardware before, to sometimes make a steel handle or knob of some kind or pull, and then I sometimes will just braze it to a bolt so that I can attach it to something else. So it's a quick way to make a weld, even though it's not terribly structural. But I can't break it apart. I'd have to try pretty hard to break that. And just like before, whenever I'm using any kind of gas bottle, when I'm all done, I'm going to turn the valves till they're in the closed position. I'm going to loosen the regulator until it rattles a little bit, and then I will bleed my lines to get all the gas out of the hoses and release the pressure out of the regulator. And when I'm all done doing that, I can coil up the hose around the handle to the tank dolly so that it's nice and neat and nobody trips, and we know that it's ready to be used again. So this tool right here is called a spot welder, and it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It welds a little tiny spot between two pieces of metal. It has this set of jaws, which are electrodes, and this functions much the same as the arc welder. It basically creates a short circuit, and within that short circuit, it welds the two pieces of metal together. It's very simple to use. There's a set of jaws. You position your two pieces of metal between those jaws, you hold it, and while you're holding it, you push this switch. Now, the switch is spring-loaded, so it doesn't stay on. You push it, it's on. When you let go, it automatically goes off. You shouldn't ever push this switch for more than 5 seconds. And if you do a 5-second weld, you have to wait 5 seconds before you do it again. This is something that you have to adjust depending on the thickness of your materials. So you have to tinker with it a little bit. And it's new, so we're gonna have to get to know it. But I'll show you how it works in general. It's really pretty great. And this is probably the simplest welder that you could pick to use. So I have these two little scraps of thin metal here, and what I'm gonna do is clamp them together between here. Now, wherever those 2 points meet, there's going to be a weld as soon as I push this button. That was probably only 3 seconds. And as you can see, there's a little spot on either side, and those are totally stuck together. I can get them apart. Okay, so I need to weld them for a little bit longer, so let's try that again. There's no danger of shocking yourself unless you push the on button. You would never want to have your bare skin touching these two elements and then push the on button. It would shock you really badly. 1, 2, 3. Now we got a little arcing that time, a few sparks. And that feels like a stronger weld. So this is very cool. You can imagine making a box out of metal, folding the sides up, and putting them in there and doing a quick spot weld to keep the whole thing together. Yeah, it's very cool. You can also, if you were welding something that was large, you could very easily pick this up and use it. They use this for doing automotive like body work and things like that. So if you're afraid of the other welders, or you don't think that you want to learn to weld, you don't want to commit that much to metalworking, I suggest you try this. This would be a great way to make a little metal form with very minimal commitment to welding.